But if we don't reuse the data and create competitive advantage with that data, shame on us, because that data that you use for regulatory reporting, it's also useful for marketing, for risk management, for finance, all kinds of other things.
Neue Folgen jeden Freitag. In dieser digitalen Welt gibt es einen speziellen Faktor, der über Erfolg und Misserfolg entscheidet: Daten. Doch nur die wenigsten wissen sie für sich zu nutzen. Wer seine Kunden verstehen will, um ihnen das bieten zu können, was sie brauchen, kommt um ein professionelles Datenmanagement nicht herum. Jonas Rashedi interviewt andere Experten aus den Data-Bereichen und zeigt Schritt für Schritt, wie genau das funktioniert.
Welcome to My Data's Better Than Yours, the Data podcast. Welcome from my side, a new English episode, and warm welcome to Stephen. Hi, Stephen.
Thank you. Greetings.
Could you more or less, introduce yourself and the company you are working in? Because I already had a chance to ask Google for my guest, and it's amazing.
Sure. So I'm Stephen Brobst. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Teradata, and we provide a cloud platform for data management and analytics. And then I've been CTO of the company since 1999, when my MIT startup company was acquired by, at the time, NCR. And then I was part of the team that took Teradata public when we spun off from NCR, went public on the New York Stock Exchange.
So you are more or less the technology guy behind Teradata, right?
Wow, there's not just there are many technology people, male and female, behind Teradata. Yeah. So yeah, I'm one of the army. Yes.
Yeah. You know, it's always one or two persons facing to the face to the customer, and yeah. And I had a chance to check your track record, and I think it's very amazing, right? So you had some chance to provide a report for Barack Obama. You had a chance for more publications and more stuff like this.
Yeah, I'm a bit of an academic, gone into the commercial world, so I have published quite a few papers, both in academic journals as well as more commercial journals, co-authored in a couple of books. So yeah, I tend to write a lot when I'm not coding, I guess. So either I'm writing code or I'm writing words. And the work with Barack Obama's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology was definitely one of the more interesting projects they worked on. That was kind of a dozen of us, mainly academics, mainly pure academics. I was one of only two people from the commercial world on that committee, and we made recommendations to the president for what investments should be made around specifically big data to sort of position us as a country, as a leader in areas such as education and transportation, cybersecurity, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
Is there any chance to have a more or less management summary as an outcome, or what is your advice?
Well, I'll tell you that the last sentence of the final paragraph in the executive summary to the president was, every government agency needs a big data strategy. That's the bottom line.
Oh, that's nice.
So we need to take the data from all those sensors out there and then do interesting things with it. That was the bottom line. My area was specifically in healthcare. I'm very interested in healthcare. Although as a group of us, we participated in all, but we took certain areas where we tended to have more focus. And I was focused on healthcare and software engineering. So
yeah, and to be honest, a big data strategy should or all companies should have a big data strategy, right?
Absolutely. Although, to be honest, this big data terminology, I don't really like this this word to me, it's all data, it's all interesting, and big data was kind of a marketing term at that time that we wrote the report. But really, the point is data and all varieties of data, not just record-oriented structured data, but semi-structured data, unstructured data. There's lots of insights to be had from a wide range of data, whether it's big data or small data. The goal is to create value from that data.
Yeah. And do you think if you compare the maturity of the companies today to 10 years ago, what do you think? Is there a big development, or do you think we are until now slow?
Well, we're always slower than I would like, but there certainly has been a lot of progress. 10 years ago, almost everybody was still on-prem with their data, and building data warehouses and similar kinds of things in on-premises appliances and such. Today, I think most of at least the innovative companies have pivoted to the cloud, and I would argue that innovation happens much more effectively in the cloud than it does on-prem.
Sure.
And people sometimes get this idea that they're moving to the cloud to save money. And saving money is always a good thing, but I think if you're moving to the cloud just to save money, you've missed the real point. You're really moving to the cloud to innovate more quickly and more effectively. That's the big value in the long term from my perspective.
And as you mentioned, if you're not having the right goal or the right strategy moving into the cloud, you will for sure fail, right? Or you will have the wrong key measures to ensure.
You'll be heading in the wrong direction, and if you have the wrong measures, then you get the wrong behaviors, right? And so, this was a problem in actually the big data, mania of 10 years ago. That people were measuring success by how many bytes they put on disk drives rather than the value they created from the data. Bytes on disk drives is a really good measure of cost. It's a very terrible measure of value. And so one of my pet peeves around data is when people refer to data as an asset. This is actually not how we should think of data, because assets we accumulate, we put in a warehouse, maybe a data warehouse, and we count how many bytes we've accumulated and how much history we have and so on. And this is really not the right strategy. I would like us to think of data as a product, and the point of a product is to be consumed and to create value from that product. And one of my other pet peeves is this term that I think it was The Economist originally made the quote that data is the oil of the 21st century. This is terrible. Oil is a terrible resource. You burn it, it creates pollution. It's after one use, it's gone. Data is so much better. Data is reusable. The more you use it, the better it gets. Data is a sustainable resource. And 10 years from now, I would suggest that oil is actually not interesting. I would suggest in 10 years from now, data is super interesting, even more interesting than it is today. So I hate this analogy of data being the oil of the 21st century. Data is way, way better than oil.
Yeah, and that's very, very, very interesting, Stephen, because if I compare companies, if they treat, as you said, data as if they treat data as oil, and if you compare companies who treat data in a different way, like if we use buzzword or analogies, more or less like the sun, so you can reproduce it, you recycle it in different ways. You have a central place where you start with the value change, then you will, and if you compare then those different ways, you will see that the companies who will treat data like a sun or something like that, they are more effective or more
they're more competitive
successful
in the end, right? So I'll give you an example. I think it's a really good point that you made. Here's the anti-pattern. We have something that we need to solve with data, and we create a point solution with the data, and we tick the box that we delivered a regulatory report, and then we're done. this is terrible, right? The whole point of data is to create reusability of the data. And so one of the chief data officers that I work with, a large bank in the UK, he talks about the regulatory dividend. If we need to bring a bunch of data in and integrate the data and then produce reports for regulators and so on, that's great. We need to do that. But if we don't reuse the data and create competitive advantage with that data, shame on us, because that data that used for regulatory reporting, it's also useful for marketing, for risk management, for finance, all kinds of other things. And we shouldn't have islands of isolated point solutions. We should be reusing the data to get the maximum value from the data.
Yeah, and what I always recommend, and happy to hear your thoughts, is we should not do a customer journey mapping. We should do a data journey mapping. If you compare from the left side ETL, ELT processes to the right side data activation, visualization, data science, and stuff like that, you should always tackle your use cases to compare if I integrate this different data source or this data source, which of those data use cases at the end could I tackle with the same data source, with the same model, to ensure that within one model, within one data source, I could tackle different use cases and could, let's say, get a lot of things done.
Yeah, one of the large American telecommunications companies that I work with, they do this very interesting thing. They have this scorecard, and they keep track of the use cases of the data and which data that the use case consumed. And they track the reuse of data across the different use cases, and they keep score of when they add a new business application, how much new data did they have to bring in versus how much did they reuse. And because they're relatively mature in their data and how they integrate the data and so on, in most cases, in excess of 90% of the data is already there, and they're reusing it. Maybe they have to add a little bit here and there and so on, but in most cases, the bulk of the work has already been done from a data provisioning point of view. The data has already been used, so the quality has some level of assurance to it, and they're a lot more agile. It's interesting. There was a kind of academic paper that was published by Google a while back that observed that when you look at these data pipelines that are created by data scientists in a large enterprise, more than half of the data in most data pipelines is duplicated in half a dozen or more other data pipelines. And that's really a shame, because we're not as agile as we could be. We're not as cost effective as we could be if we took a more enterprise approach to reusing the data. On the other hand, we have to be careful. Enterprise approach sometimes is associated with high governance. And the more governance you have, in many cases, the slower you move. So you got to get the right balance between enterprise reuse and what I call minimum viable governance, the minimum amount required in order to drive, connected data products instead of isolated data products.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Stephen, that's what you already said, right? If you treat data like a classic asset, you will protect it like an asset, and one department will for sure protect it, and there will be not the communication over the whole organization to ensure that we had this kind of data within this use case, and this could be the benefits for the purchasing department instead of the marketing department, or they could more or less exchange in a better way.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of self-service. To your point, we want that data to be consumed.
Yeah.
And if I'm a data scientist, anybody between me and the data is the enemy. And usually their name is spelled DBA, right? And the DBA is no, you can't access the data. You're going to make the performance bad. It's going to cost too much money. So on. This is very counterproductive for innovation. So we need to make sure that financial controllers and DBAs are not creating friction in the innovation process. And this is one of the beautiful things I like about the cloud, because you can provision resources, you can do the innovation. When you're done, you shut it down. The cost goes away. That's not the case in the on-prem world, because you get this innovation hangover when you brought in some hardware with GPUs to do the machine learning, and it turned out not to be the right algorithm for what you were trying to learn, and now you're stuck with this infrastructure, and it's no good, right? So you really don't like this capex model, especially when you're innovating, and cloud is just the opposite, and it is much more beautiful than on-prem for innovation specifically.
Yeah, my analogy for those thoughts is wedding. So what is the key factor for success on a wedding? I think it's what you provide on for the lunch or for dinner or whatever, and then you can serve it as menu or you can serve it as buffet. And I love to serve things based on buffet, because buffet is more or less the self-service approach for meals, right? And we should
empower the people. Empower the people is a beautiful thing, right?
So, yeah, it's very important. That's really nice. I love your thoughts. Yeah, and I think and that's the way how you should think about the data culture, right? Because I think it's not the right way to think, okay, we need data culture, and data culture or data lineage means more or less explaining that data is good and you should use data. I think it's the way how you should think about data is very important, and how you should treat data to become more or less very important within your organization.
And treating it as a product is really the key thing, right?
Yeah.
And to do so without a lot of centralized governance. I think a lot of teams in the beginning, when they just started this journey, you needed to centralize the resources, because there weren't many people that had this kind of data-centric thinking, this mindset, because most organizations are very application-centric. So you had to bring together the like-minded people so they could drive things like standards and enterprise data models and things like that. But I think we're past that. You asked the question earlier about 10 years ago versus now. I think that those old organizational structures, those centralized BICCs and data integration competency centers, those are bottlenecks, right? And what's happened is you've got these centralized resources that are responsible for building the data warehouse or building the data marts and so on. And on one side, you have an exponential growth in the people and software processes that want to consume data. And then on the other side, you have exponential growth in the data sources that you're interested in, because it's not only internal data anymore, it's also external data. I want weather data, I want regulatory data, I want all my internal data, I want all this stuff that's going on. So you have exponential growth in data sources, exponential growth in consumption, and then a centralized team that's supposed to deliver all the answers. And that just doesn't work. And say, well, add more people to the team. Well, we know that adding more people to a centralized team above a certain scale, it just makes them slower. You create more meetings, you don't create more output. And so we need to decentralize the teams. And I think there's some great work by a woman named Degani out of Silicon Valley, the San Francisco Bay Area, who wrote about this data mesh concept of really how to decentralize teams and align them to business process boundaries to create these data products. And then I think from an engineering point of view, our challenge is to then connect these data products so that we can deliver this concept, which Gartner many years ago coined as the logical data warehouse, where we take the different nodes in the data mesh and we connect them so that we can have an exponential value proposition rather than a linear value proposition with a bunch of isolated data products.
Yeah, it's if you compare it, it's, I think curves is not the right word. Waves. It's always more like waves. You're starting with a central person, then you have the decentral situation, because a lot of different departments start to hire data people. Then you have again a central function, and then you have again a decentral function. But you need to find the right balance based on the data maturity within the organization to ensure that you serve the right needs, right? Or
I agree. So the analogy I usually use is a pendulum, right? So this pendulum swings back and forth, centralized, decentralized, and right now I think many organizations the pendulum is too far centralized. Now, if you swing it too far the other way, complete decentralization equals anarchy, right? So I would argue you still need some governance, but not completely centralized, right? So some enterprise level governance around things like security and standards and how you generate surrogate IDs and things like that. This is important stuff. But again, this term minimum viable governance. What is the minimum governance you need in order to make sure that you're creating interoperability and efficiency in delivering the data products within the organization?
Stephen, I see. So I have to inspire you that we write something together in a new book about those kind of topics.
Absolutely, I'm game. Do I get to pick the language?
yeah, for sure. I will train my English for sure. Another then we should go ahead. But I love it.
I was thinking Python actually, but okay.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I will do my best. Yeah. Yeah, if we now go deeper within the organization, I think if you start to find, let's say, the first data use case, the first data product, I think I would always start in the marketing, in my opinion, because it's very easy to find good and easy use cases for the marketing because they always would like to use data to improve their marketing, right? Efficiency and stuff like that. But in my opinion, based on my experience in the last few years, is that if marketeers are sitting in the same meeting with data scientists, the outcome could be very difficult or could end up very do you know what I mean? More or less, it could be.
Yeah, although I would
two sides
argue,
of a coin.
My experience is the marketing people aren't the problem. I think it's actually the IT people that are the problem.
Okay.
So what I usually see is the marketing people and the data scientists, they actually get along very well because they have all these ideas of how to use data and so on.
Yeah.
And it's the IT people who are usually the problem. No, we can't do that. No, for open source, no, too hard. We have to do an enterprise data model. We have to do top-down design. We have to do enterprise. Marketing people and data scientists, they tend to be very opportunistic, very sort of bottoms up, and the analogy I sometimes make is the IT people are like the responsible parents. They control the budget. They make sure all the data is secure. They make sure we're being responsible and so on. The data scientists and the marketing people, they're like teenagers with lots of ideas and so on, and completely out of control. They don't really pay much attention to the budgets and so on. They just want to create great ideas. And the reality is they both need each other, right? Because data scientists are actually terrible data engineers. They actually typically do not have the, I don't know if it's discipline or interest to put things into fully automated production.
Yeah.
We need data engineers to do that, right?
Yeah.
And so they need each other. And the problem is, and many households have the same problems. Why I use this analogy: the parents and the teenagers don't talk the same language. In fact, they don't even like to talk to each other, right? If you have a household where the teenager comes home from school, they go straight to their room, they don't talk to anybody, and so on. This is a dysfunctional household. And I would argue that there's a lot of benefit if you can get the parents and the teenagers to talk every single day, even only 15 minutes. So let's call that the daily stand-up, right? Where we actually have a cross-functional team. We have the data engineers, we have the data scientists, we have the marketing product owners, and they're actually in the same meeting. And then we have family counselor to make sure we're collaborating. That's the Scrum Master, right? The Scrum Master is a collaborator, a communicator, and helping, the two sides communicate well. And if they spend 15 minutes together every day, you start to actually appreciate the value that each person in the team brings to the table, and so actually I think marketing and data scientist people, they get along great. It's the IT people that if the marketing and data science people develop a great model for predicting behavior and show that it has huge value, and they say, okay, we want to put this in production, and then IT says, what is this crappy code that you created? This is unusable, unmaintainable. It's going to take us 6 months to rewrite all this, and we're going to have to collect all the requirements and redesign and so on. This is a disaster. This is this old style waterfall development methodology. Throw the requirements over the fence to IT. Doesn't work. Right, so I love this more this analytic ops or agile plus DevOps when applied to analytics, where you've got the data ops part for getting the data, and then the ML ops part for doing the machine learning, and you're doing sprints in order to deliver the value rather than this kind of throw it over the fence waterfall kind of stuff.
So to cut the team together in a different way, right? So to mix up. A product team, let's call it product team, or a sprint team, right? And to have different kind of roles within the organization.
Absolutely. And so typically the team has 5 different skill sets, right? There's the business product owner, who's that marketing person who has this idea that he wants to cross-sell from this product to that product, or whatever it is that they're trying to do, or predict defection, renewals, whatever. Then you've got the data scientist skill set, which is kind of the power user, right-hand person to the marketing person, going to sort of understand the problem and then try to translate data into some value outcome. And then you've got data engineers, and I would argue there's 2 kinds of data engineers. There's the data acquisition engineers that go get the data that you need, and then there's the data consumption engineers that take the data and actually build some value proposition based on the work that the data scientist is doing, right? So there's 2 kinds of data engineers, very distinct skill sets: the consumption engineers and the acquisition engineers, and then the family counselor is that Scrum Master, which kind of program manager type of person. So those 5 skill sets we want in the team. It's a very cross-functional team. You allow the team to self-organize. You don't impose a structure on it. You keep the team small, right? I'm sure you've heard this terminology, the 2 pizza principle, right? The teams to be no bigger than you can feed with 2 pizzas, right? So that means between 6 and a dozen people. These are big American pizzas, right? So keep the team small and it's productive. If you make the team big, then it becomes unproductive, because then you spend all your time in meetings instead of delivering.
But how you would tackle the situation that I in my opinion, and based on my experience in the last month and years, it's very important to start with an MVP. So minimal viable product, right?
Absolutely.
And to prove the value. So otherwise
Absolutely
you have
agree.
the situation that you close the door for your room, and you more or less come out after 6 months, and you will celebrate yourself for a great data product, and they all will more or less explain that's not what we would like to see, right? So what is your idea to tackle this situation? So would you start within the same team, the MVP, or would you more or less have one data scientist with a test data set to start?
So I definitely agree with the MVP, and this team is responsible for creating the series of MVPs. So this approach that I'm describing, you're basically doing 2 or 3 week sprints. The first sprint is a discovery sprint, where you have an idea about how I can do cross-selling, and then the data scientist goes and gets the data, working together with the data engineers, and we try out some ideas. Can I predict the behavior of the customer better with this data, together with some other data that's probably already in the data product? Can we build a better model? And if the answer is yes, okay. Now the second sprint is, let's take some of the attributes that we need and then promote them from the raw data in the data lake into the data product, which has appropriate lineage and service levels and so on. And then we can deploy the model. And it's just the first cut at the model. It's not necessarily going to be all the data we would ever want, and we're going to continue to improve the model. Our first model might be using a simple linear model, but then as we progress, we might say, well, okay, let's do a non-linear model with, instead of a regression, we're going to do random forest, and then eventually we evolve into a multi-layer neural network. But don't start with the multi-layer network to the point of your minimum viable product. Don't start with the hardest thing you can do. Get value incrementally by increasing the sophistication of the usage of the data, as well as the algorithms that you're applying for your machine learning.
But and based, if you more or less are if all people are sitting in the same boat, hopefully it's the same analogy in English than in German, and you have the situation that all people want to ensure that you have success, right? Because if you're starting to with the first week, you will get a business plan, or with the second week, you get a business plan. Then you will have 2% improvement. Then there will be 3% improvement, 5% improvement, and stuff like that. And that's within this journey, all people will grow up and grow together to ensure that all feel very responsible for the result of the data product.
That's right. That's why you have to eliminate the us and them between IT and marketing and data scientists and so on. We're going to create a cross-functional team, and that team is empowered, and they make the commitments to themselves and to the organization that they're going to deliver. And if I get to define what is in scope for each sprint, then I'm going to be committed to it. If management says from above, you must build a model that, in 6 weeks is going to do the following, this is nonsense, right? Because where did 6 weeks come from? Where did the requirement? It doesn't work, right? This kind of top-down pushing delivery dates and scope doesn't work very well. That's the old style of doing things.
Yeah, I think if you more or less think about the situation that science is always built on hypothesis, and then you'll test something, then there will be a good or a bad result. You will improve yourself day by day, week by week, month by month, and stuff like that. Then you will see that other kind of approaches will not really work, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that adopting this agile DevOps approach is really a critical success factor for innovation in the data space, for sure.
Do you have a use case based on your experience where you have a really good result or a really bad result for both kind of approaches?
I've seen one of the I'll say bad results is when the marketing data science team weren't working well with the IT team. I'm not going to name the company, but just describe the scenario. Yeah. So basically what they had figured out is they had a website, and they wanted to present, content which is custom to the individual coming to the website, recognizing all their past, behaviors and what they bought and didn't buy and so on. And they did this prototype where they built a machine learning model that suggested next best action for this particular customer. And it was based on, that person we could identify when they come back to the website, and the results were huge. It was between 300 and 500% improvement on basically sell through on the website. So this is a great result. Yep. But remember, I told you this was a bad news story. So here's what happened. So they had this great result, and they kind of prototyped it with a test audience. And they said, okay, now we want to go like full production with this. Yeah. And IT said, oh, wait a minute here. This impacts the customer experience. And if you impact the customer experience, then that is a critical level 1 system. And this data warehouse that you have, it doesn't have disaster recovery. And so all critical, level 1 systems have to have a disaster recovery solution. And so we have to then take what you built on the data warehouse, and we're going to port it to this operational data store. We're going to use our transaction processing technology to do this because we have full DR capability and so on. And after 9 months, then we can give you something. And by the way, you have to pay for all of this. You have to pay for us to rebuild the database and make a disaster recovery. And marketing is going to, we did this prototype in weeks, and now you're going to take 9 months and charge us through the nose. And we did this like a skunk works. It cost us almost nothing. And so they argued for months about this because marketing didn't want to pay for it. They said, no, we want the value immediately and so on. And finally, what the marketing people did is say, look, right now, if someone comes to the website, they get generic content. Everybody sees the same. So if our data warehouse is down, we give them the generic content. It's no worse than what they get today. But if the data warehouse is not down, then we're going to use this machine learning, do the scoring in real time, and then do it. And we're going to get this 300 to 500% benefit. And there is no risk to a worse customer experience than what they have today for us doing what we just described. And then IT couldn't argue with that. So they said, well, we're uncomfortable, but I guess we don't really have a choice here. And so then they went out and did it, and it was hugely successful. But it took them months longer than it should, not because of anything technical, but because of organizational us and them, and these arbitrary rules. And they weren't communicating well. They weren't collaborating. They didn't really have a shared goal, because marketing's goal was to increase sales. IT's goal was to make sure they met all the service levels as defined by what means business critical and so on. So they didn't have shared goals, and that led to dysfunctional behavior. So that there was kind of both good news and bad news in that particular example. But the good news could have been a lot sooner had they been working together more closely.
That's a very, very good example. And I think it's always having all people in the same boat and explaining what could be the goal, more or less could discuss it and confirm it from different point of views, and then we can, or the team can go ahead. Yeah. And I think then you more or less eliminate the politic stuff, right? And to be honest, there's always a bit of politics.
Yeah, and it's also a matter of what is your mindset. I think that many people think of, the data warehouse, oh, that's just for reporting. Just reporting. I think reporting it is necessary because we have regulators and we have people that, in finance that want to look at reports, but it's the least interesting thing you do with the data warehouse, right? The interesting stuff happens when you're impacting the business on a day-to-day basis. So you have strategic intelligence, which helps us understand the long-term planning, but then you've got operational intelligence, which allows you to act right now based on what's happening right now and take informed action to create better outcomes. I was with a large logistics company in Germany yesterday, and they are amazing with the kind of things that they do with the data to make sure that the deliveries that they're making to their customers are on time. They're tracking against fraud. They're making sure that if they need to reroute, they do it before the package is late and so on. It is it's a very sophisticated use of data because they're not trapped in this old world of data warehouses for reporting. Yes, of course, you can do reporting for a data warehouse, but this is like 20 years ago thinking about what is a data warehouse for.
Yeah, right. I think that's the more or less the start of business intelligence, right? To provide reports, but we based on our current maturity, we are far away from doing classic reports. Hopefully,
yes.
Hopefully. Yeah, Stephen, thanks a lot. I think it's a really amazing episode, and hopefully the listeners feel our passion about data, but I think they will. Could you sum up our episode? What do you think should be the 3 takeaways for our listeners?
I think that number 1 is treat data as a product to be consumed and create value, not as an asset.
Yep.
Number 2, I would say move quickly, right? And use this data ops, machine learning ops, small teams, cross-functional teams, self-organizing. Use the best of what we learned in software engineering around agile DevOps and apply that to the data in order to get maximum value. And the third point, I think, is around the teamwork between the IT teams and the data science teams and the business product owners. It's kind of related to the second point. You need that teamwork, and it's not about technology. It's about making sure that you have good teamwork and that you have the autonomy and self-service and this minimum viable governance kind of approach for a decentralized approach to delivering value from data. Those are the key points. And overriding that is, in the cloud, you're going to innovate much more quickly. So think about how you're going to use these techniques in the cloud environment to accelerate innovation.
Nice. Really nice. So there are always more or less 2 questions for my guests. One is, what do you do privately with data? And the second is, how would you describe your data game? With a film or movie title.
What I do with the data, I'm a bit of a data geek, so
Yeah.
I collect lots of data. There's a guy from Wired magazine named Kevin Kelly who coined a term that I've kind of adopted called the quantified self. So basically, it means collect all the data about yourself. So I can tell you, everywhere that I've been for the last 20 years by day, exactly where I've been. And I've traveled to over 170 countries, so I move a lot.
Yeah.
Prior to COVID, I was only in the same city for more than 5 consecutive days twice in the previous 20 years. So I move very fast, and so I keep track of everything. I know where I've been. I know what books I've read. I know what movies I've seen. I know which clients that I've worked with. I'm definitely a quantified self kind of person. That also goes for health things. So tracking health aspects in terms of the number of steps you walk a day, and so I'm a huge hiker. I'm going to go to the mountains of Pakistan in a couple of weeks to do some amazing trekking there with a team of people that have gone with, not during COVID, but before that for many years. And so I'm a huge hiker, and I collect data on my hikes as well. And I have both structured and unstructured data. So I have lots of pictures in addition to the structured data for what I do on a day-to-day basis. So.
And the second question about the movie title or film title?
If I were to sort of create the film title, or actually I prefer books over films, so I'm going to change your question a little bit. So it's kind of a book title, because the book is always better than the film, right? So data saves the world. And what do I mean by that? I kind of hinted at it earlier. I think that data is the key to sustainability. Right, so we're having a lot of discussions. I had big discussions yesterday with this logistics company. A lot of discussion about what does sustainability mean, and I would argue that the key to sustainability is transparency, and transparency comes with the data. And we can use the data to build machine learning models to create a more sustainable society. So there are many different dimensions of sustainability in terms of economic sustainability and diversity and carbon footprint and so on. But let's just take the carbon footprint as an example. Many companies have built activity-based costing models to measure profitability of their products. Whether you're a retailer or a bank or a telecommunications company or a logistics company, we build these activity-based costing models. Well, we can take these activity-based costing models that count euros, and we can count CO2. And so now I can track for every item I sell on the store shelf, what was the CO2 footprint of that item? And I don't mean just scope 1, I mean scope 1, 2, and 3. So full transparency to the full value chain for sustainability on that carbon footprint. And then I can start building machine learning models to optimize sustainability using the data. And even let's say for a bank, right? If I'm a bank, who do I choose to give loans to? Should I choose to give loans to people who are polluting the atmosphere, or to people who are investing in wind farms, for example? Right, and so it is not the goal of the bank to be giving away money. Right, they have to make a profit, otherwise they're not going to be sustainable themselves. Right, but the problem is if you create a Venn diagram, here's profitable business and here's sustainable business. If it's only a thin slice that overlaps, then we're not going to get enough sustainability. But we can use machine learning to actually create business models where we create a stronger overlap in the Venn diagram between profitable business and sustainable business. And I think data is the key to that. And that's why I call it data saves the world, because I think the world, quite frankly, is in trouble. And we need to take positive steps to do this, and proactive steps, and data is really the key to success.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, you're right. I think that's good thoughts after the episode. Nice. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the conversation.